Sarasota County, and as you know from the prior week, we do take it very seriously, and we have a very diligent and hardworking committee here, or at least a subset of them. So thank you again for being here. I'm going to be reading the script to ensure I cover everything and follow our standard protocol. I'll try to speak slowly because I tend to speak very fast. Since representatives from both applications are here today, I only have to read this one time. And it is a public meeting and will be videotaped and recorded. So as a courtesy, please silence your phones and other devices. So I look at Katrina. Okay, so the total interview session we have is scheduled from 9 to 11:30, and to include both applications, we're going to begin with Pinecrest Academy, followed by the Dreamers Academy. I'm going to take about 10 minutes to go over the process for the record, and then I'm going to ask the CRC members to introduce themselves, and then at that point I'll call up the Pinecrest folks, and you will be seated, and I'll ask you to spend about 5 to 10 minutes if you'd like to introduce your team, and also to give us a brief overview of your application. Okay. And then at the very end, I'll have about 5 minutes to answer your direct questions as it pertains to your application, and then we'll move on to the next applicant. So as you know, our CRC has carefully reviewed and analyzed your written application, and we pretty much stick to the state's evaluation tool and follow the state's evaluation criteria. So you will see that throughout. We also use the state's definition of what partially meets, and does not meet each respective standard. As you know, we gave you some written feedback on the 10th, and that was also what was brought to our board members' attention last week when you had that meeting with our board members to discuss your proposal. We've given you an opportunity to respond to our written questions and requests for clarification, which you did last week, and we have started the process of reviewing it and will continue to do so as we finalize our evaluation. This part is very important to us, and we were one of the first counties, I shouldn't say that, maybe, we were one of the first on the cutting edge of doing this. Not every district does it. We feel it's a very valuable part of the process. And we use it to probe, further questions that are raised due to our initial review or also from due diligence. We also use it to corroborate information in the application, because sometimes the written word can be there, but we want to make sure that the applicant can support that, what's written in the application. And then we also like to evaluate capacity of the applicants to open up a successful charter school. So basically, we're going to follow up and dig deeper and vet and probe in a nice, respectful way. So please be assured that we have been very thorough, and we will continue to be very respectful and open-minded about your proposed school. We're going to, because we have limited time, and the application has 22 sections plus attachments, we're going to focus on the most essential sections, essential to operating a successful school. So we're not going to ask questions about every single section in the application. We're also looking for alignment. And contrary to popular belief, we actually do go through the whole application. These guys can attest to the fact that I drill them and we go back and forth. Does the budget support the staffing? Does the staffing match up with the students, etc.? So we will have more of scenarios and examples, like show us how a typical student will use these strategies in a given environment. So they will be situational questions. And we also may ask you specific questions about sections in your application. So since we have so much to cover, I have the authority to interject if I have to keep us on task. We want to make sure that you have time to cover everything, and sometimes I have to keep my committee on task also. Ms. Kohler in the back is going to remind me, she's going to wave little signs to remind me, well, there you are. Make sure you're visible. Okay, so also very important, please be reminded this process cannot be used to amend your application, and by that we mean to introduce significantly new material or things that are substantive changes, because basically then you are changing your written application. Please follow the protocol. And since we have one group here, because the charter contract will be between the sponsor, our Sarasota County School Board, and the governing board of the proposed school, we expect to hear primarily from the school board. Okay, see, Al, you got me off my script here. Come on in. So, In addition, members of the audience that are here to observe and show support are welcome. However, the interview itself will be conducted with members of the school's governing board as listed in the application who are present here today. So now we're going to begin with introductions of our committee, and then I will ask while we're doing that if Pinecrest folks want to come up and sit here, the board members and Mr. Barroso, if you like. Okay, so I'm going to start, Elaine, I'm going to start with you with introductions. Oh yeah, don't forget the mic.
Yeah, right. I'm Rabbi Elaine Glickman. I am the community representative.
Good morning, Jamie Rodriguez, Supervisor ESOL and Migrant Programs.
Good morning, Sue Meckler, Director of Curriculum and Instruction for Middle Schools.
Good morning, Al Herrera, Human Resources.
Good morning, Katrina Ward, Supervisor of Charter Schools and School Choice.
Natalie Roca again. Other duties as assigned, charter schools, school choice, grants, IT, research and assessment so far today. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Krista Kurtner, and I'm in the budget department.
Hello, Suzanne Nyman. I'm one of the district reading specialists.
Hi, good morning. I'm Tammy Castles. I'm the Exceptional Student Education Supervisor. Nice to see you.
Chairman of the Board of the Pinecrest Schools.
Carlos Alvarez, Principal, City Highly Educational Academy, and Board Member for Pinecrest Academy.
Shanine Sadesky, Board Member of Pinecrest.
Lily Salazar, National Director, Special Ed and Student Support, Academica.
Good morning and welcome. So as I said, we're going to focus on certain sections only, and we may have follow-up questions depending on your response. So contrary to what that young man made it sound like, we are much more casual, and this is more of a casual conversation, even though I was empowered by the 1-minute announcement. So I do have in front of me your application, and should we need to refer to it, and plus I have a copy of, we all have copies of the document that you submitted on the 18th, I believe. Yeah. So I'm going to start off with, well, first of all, we know that you have, you're replicating a school, and we know it's not a high-performing replication. We've noticed you've clarified that for us, and we get that. And that you are replicating the school, the Pinecrest School model. And you have several schools that you're operating in Miami-Dade as well as Orange County, correct? And I think there's one that was going to open or went in Lake County as well. So the questions that we had about your target population, you did a good job with showing us the area that you're interested in, and that what we call the Palma Ranch area. And you're right, there is a need there. It's getting crowded in some of those schools, but it's not even. You know, some schools like Ashton and Sarasota are just bursting at the seams. However, we have other schools that have capacity, like imagine Palma Ranch, which is also a K-8 school. So we were just questioning that. And I know you don't have to commit to a school, but we wanted you maybe to elaborate more about how confident you feel that you're going to draw those numbers that you have in your projections.
Okay. In general, and I know that you're all familiar now with the Pinecrest model, reading the application.
Pull that closer to you a little bit.
It's good.
Just,
okay. Sorry.
There.
I think that by now you guys are familiar with the Pinecrest model, and in general, our schools has been successful. It has not been difficult to attract population. It all started with one school many years ago in 2001, 2002, which we first opened at a banquet hall while the building was being built in Burr Road in Miami, and we started like with 100 students. That school was bursting at the seam in 3 years. And the demand, it was over 1,000 every year on the waiting list. So then we went to a second school in the south part of the county, eventually the north, more to the east from the west, etc. We are on a general area. Like all the schools are 3 or 5 miles away, and every one of them at this point have a big waiting list. The schools in Orlando, by definition, are on very small sites. We have Pinecrest Prep in Orlando, has been growing, but is at capacity in the place we're at. We have been looking at different sites to expand. It hasn't been that easy because we also don't want to go too far from where the school is now drawing the students. So those are things that are happening, but because of the reputation of the school, because of our results, it really has not been that hard to fill the schools. And I think also we try to get high-performing principals. We are constantly looking for the best teachers, and we try to do innovative program. We have a lot of student activities. The fact that we have a very intense elementary STEM program, including Project Lead the Way from kindergarten. Our robotic program, we right now have one of our schools, Pinecrest South, is going for the third or fourth time now to international competition in robotics. And every one of our schools has made a big effort to be a STEM school in Miami-Dade County. We had more gold schools than any other group, so we're pretty proud of that. In order to be a gold school or a silver, we have people from the district, a group just as you do, people from mathematics, from science, from the vocational area, let's not call it vocational, technical area. They come and visit, they look at the classes, and one of the things is we're very hands-on. You walking into a Pinecrest class, you know it's a Pinecrest class the way the students are engaged. And I definitely invite all of you to walk into any of our schools, and I think that's what makes us a little different.
I also think to address that question, the research is showing us, and we noted this, I believe, in our comments, that Ashton Elementary in that area is at 92% capacity, and it's going to be at 100% capacity in a few years. And the growth projections show that you're going to need 3 additional elementary schools in the years to come. And it's in addition to what Ms. Marty said, which is that all of our schools are bursting at the seams, and there's huge waiting lists. It's also got, in addition to the STEM program, which starts in the elementary, which is a little different, I believe, than the schools in this area. It's also the K-8 model, and a lot of parents are drawn to that model because they can have multiple siblings at the school and keep all the kids together. And we think all of those things are advantageous to us making sure we meet our enrollment projections.
Just wanted to add, and I know Ms. Marty had commented on bringing in highly qualified principals, and just to elaborate a little bit on that, within our network of schools, we have a Doral Leadership Institute, which is to prepare aspiring principals and assistant principals for the rigor of our different networks and the best practices. This program is led by a representative from each of the network schools. It's a 1-year administrative program where they have to kind of filter through, and then what we've created is like the pipeline for them to then apply for positions. So the majority of all our candidates that have been placed in schools have gone through the Doral Leadership Institute, and I think that is, I think that's an addition to helping them be successful when they have taken on the opening of a school. And
to add to that, if every time that we hire a new principal, we assign a mentor principal to that new principal, particularly when we go into a new area. And because of the way we are set up, we are very close to each other. We're constantly calling. I guess I'm probably the oldest principal they had, and now chief academic officer for the other network from Matter. But there is not a day that I do not talk to 4 or 5 principals throughout the state of Florida. The day that I don't get 3 or 4 phone calls, I said, wow, parents are good this time. We don't have, but we do talk to each other. We have a very, very strong network. And by the way, to enter that program, of course, they got to have a leadership first. It's not like, with a bachelor degree, you're going to enter. No, we have criteria, years of experience, et cetera.
Right, and I think we did acknowledge that as one of the strengths in your applications is that network that you have with the principal cohorts, and we value that as well. Our superintendent and Dr. Kingsley always say that principals are instructional leaders.
Yes.
You still have bus issues, but instructional leaders first.
Absolutely.
I think just one last thing, marketing is a big part of it too, and making sure that your community knows what's out there. And so we work closely with Academica as well, our board and the school principal and school leadership team, to make sure that we're putting out a lot of information to the community about the school, and we're building those community partnerships early on so that so that they know that we're there and we're an option and we're a choice for them.
So a couple of follow-up questions. Yes. So we did note in our questions, and I think our board also raised this concern, and we understand that a charter can defer opening. You mentioned that. We understand that. Our question was more for the reasons why, and I know that you did allude to you're not going to open if you don't have the qualified staff to come in and get going right away. But that is of concern to us because, like you said, if there's a need for a school and it's deferred 3 years, that's going to be an issue for us. Because the Lake County School, I think you said in your application that it opened 17, 18, but I don't think it did open.
It opened in 1819.
1819.
And it was more of a construction issue than anything else. The principal was found, but it was some delays on the construction, etc., that we wanted to make sure that the building would be in the right place and done correctly before we open. But in general, the more that we defer is like 1 year.
And then I think, because in the application you're required to tell us how many others you have or planning to open, and I think there are quite a few that are either opening this year or been deferred to 2019.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
7.
And then the other one. So we were concerned about so many schools that are in the queue there, and I know we understand the process and we understand companies like Academica, and we were just concerned again that we would just be one that's in the queue waiting for an opportunity or a building, and if you could speak to that, please.
I don't anticipate that because we have been approached and we do have several locations that we have been thinking in Sarasota. We have already, there's not much we could do in contract until we have an approved school with a contract, but we already have been looking at different construction firms. We have a model. We work with a firm of architects that have a pretty good setup. Like, we're not reinventing the wheel. Many of our schools are very similar in design, which make it a lot faster because if we already know that that's what's going to have to be approved. If it's approved by one county, normally it is approved by the other counties. So as we reproduce a building model, it goes a lot faster than we change them. They look a little different. The colors are different, but we do have a K-8 model that has been working quite well.
So you're saying the deferments here for opening is a combination of facility and staffing then? Okay.
And just to reassure you a little bit, Pinecrest Lakes did open recently, and it opened at the projected enrollment target.
Yeah, over the project, yeah.
And it has a waiting list in year 2, so.
Great. Okay, I'll turn it over to someone else on the committee. I'll have more questions, but I'll come back later. So the meat of any school program is the curriculum and educational program design. So I'll turn it over to either Sue or Suzanne. Sue?
You want to start with the reading?
Dr. Nyman?
Yes. Okay. Hello.
Hi.
We received your responses to questions.
Can't hear you.
We responded to the questions that you had regarding the scheduling, and you gave us some sample schedules, grade levels, and so on. But we still have a question. Looking at the middle school schedule, and knowing that you want to have a 90-minute reading block, and then throughout the day, for those students who needed it, would be an additional intensive reading block, which would be 180 minutes, and that you would perhaps, at least in the original application before the questions were asked, you said that it would be 180 minutes that you would have, and it would be taking some of the time from the electives. As we looked at the new schedule, it doesn't appear to be that. Would you explain that?
I'd be glad to. Okay, in the middle school, as you know, there is language art and there is reading. In all of our schools, every sixth grader, from gifted to the ones that are 1s and 2s, we do a block schedule with 8 classes. So each class is 90 minutes. Because we do 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6, 8. It's in 2 days. It's a block schedule, AB. It's an AB block schedule. So each class is 90 minutes. So the sixth grader will be assigned to language art, and then will also be assigned to reading. It could be according to level of the 5th grade FSA, and we're very strong using iReady. But still, if the child is a level 1 or 2, he will be taking the appropriate intensive class, but he's also going to be getting a grade level language art class. Everyone, and then if the child is advanced, etc., he's still taking reading. We even give advanced reading, which is a course that is allowed on the Florida statute, the Florida list of courses.
Florida course.
Now, in 7th grade,
That's what I'm looking.
we're going to use either intensive for the students that need it, and we are also doing a lot of creative writing with reading embedded for the students that do not need that intensive, but we're still maintaining the 2 90-minute classes. And they still have their electives, because on 8 classes, they're still going to get, let's say, it's going to be language art, 1 or 2, whatever. The reading is 2, mathematics, 3, science, comprehensive science or whatever science in 7th grade. Many of our students are already doing physical science honors to prepare them for the very strong high school. Then they have the social studies. Let's say in 6th grade would be the history, and 7th grade would be civics. Whatever the social studies is at that grade level. Physical education, and they still got room for 2 electives. If they are low in mathematics, they are going to be taking an intensive math.
Right.
If they are not, they are not. They would take an extra elective. And the students select the courses, and we place them in the level they need to be, but we are not denying them the elective. When we say from an elective, we are beyond that. During crunch time, sometimes we do the push out, the pull out, or the push in. And the push in would be in the regular intensive class or in the other reading class. But the pull out may be done for half an hour to an elective, and it would be for a short period of time. For a couple of weeks, a student, in the conversations, they need a specific skills. And at that point, if we're going to pull them out, we will probably pull them out of an elective. We're not going to pull them out for math class, science, or social studies.
We'll pull them out of the core content area.
We do not pull out of core content. Okay. We do push in, but not pull out.
A child will always have an elective.
Yeah.
The more challenging scenario for that student would be if, like Ms. Marty alluded to, if that student would have to take a remediation and intensive course in both reading and in math, and then that child will be limited to 1 elective.
Right.
But again, that child will need those skills improved in order to give him or her the best opportunity to succeed in the FSA assessment.
And I was, I'm going to talk about the ELL program. If the child is an ELL student, they're still going to take language arts through ESOL as their main course, but then they're going to get the developmental course based on their ESOL level, as opposed to being grade level. So in some cases, we may have on that developmental class 6th and 7th grade because they are level 1 ESOL, and then we could put level 1 and 2 together and level 3 and 4, but we try to maintain them as low as possible, and we try to maintain our ELL classes as small as we can, and in many cases we have paraprofessionals helping in those situations so we can move them fast into the mainstream.
Let me just share this with you, ma'am. I actually adopted one of the systems from the Pinecrest Academy model, and if I can be, very honest with you, we stopped the advanced reading in 7th grade. And our concern is maybe the flexibility of students having electives and being able to partake in these classes. And in many conversations with Ms. Marty, as we've had throughout the years, we noted that when we incorporated the advanced reading class in 8th grade, our proficiency dramatically increased the performance of the students, the percentage of kids being proficient in 8th grade compared to not taking the advanced reading, and that goes to what she's saying, that pretty much in the middle school, every student will go through a reading course, whether it's an intensive or it's an advanced. If they have already performed proficiency in the prior grade level, they'll still be in advanced. Because what we noted is that some of these kids in 7th grade, they were proficient, but by only taking 1 ELA class in 8th grade, guess what happened?
They went down.
They dropped down to 2 again. So I think, again, the advanced reading course is an addition to build upon already the strong skills they have, but also position the child not to drop back to a non-proficient score in the FSA.
And because we are very strong believers that reading is the gate, we also teach, we have a pretty good system of professional development, and reading in the content area is done throughout. Most of our teachers are CREASE trained, and they use reciprocal reading, they use all kinds of reading techniques in the social studies and science. Many times, and any one of you that have looked at an 8th grade science test or a 5th grade science test or a biology test know that if the child doesn't have command of the reading, it doesn't matter if they could talk about the sciences, they cannot read. If they have low vocabulary, in many of our schools, 60-70% of our population is or has been ELL at some point when they enter school. So vocabulary is very intense. But we're finding out that that's not only with the ELL students. All students need that strength in vocabulary. And we do a lot of that through our tutoring when we need to, but also through the content area. We expect the content area teachers, in many cases, to discuss the vocabulary, to look for prior knowledge, to see where those students are, so that they're not reading a paragraph of which there are 5 words that they don't know what it is. So reading is throughout the curriculum.
Every teacher is a reading teacher.
And we do.
Even glancing through the FSA math.
Yeah.
If you don't understand what you're reading, you don't have no shot at solving the problem. You know, so all these assessments, these statewide assessments, what we've noted, the reading is very comprehensive, and we have to build those skills for those kids to give them the best opportunity to succeed. I mean, the math one, I mean, the reading is comprehensive. I mean, you can't even decode. You don't even have a shot of going to step 2 and trying to solve the problem.
If a child is 3 or 4 years behind, he's not going to pass algebra, no matter how much math in an equation they could do. There's no way to do that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Sue?
Thank you. That was a very comprehensive answer. In addition to that, then I want to add on to Suzanne's question, which is related to, now that I understand you're doing a block schedule, because I wasn't aware of that. Looking at 4 90-minute periods a day takes us to 360 minutes, which is a 6-hour day.
No, okay.
So
we
could you
also have
clarify that?
We have homeroom.
Okay.
And lunch. No, we are going to have the 7 hour and 20 minutes, the same amount of hours that everybody had to have.
How long is your
It's more,
day?
it's 5, student will it could be 7:30 to 2:30, 8 to 3, or 8:30 to 3:30. Depend.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
It could be either 7:30 to 2:30, 8 to 3, or 8:30 to 3:30. Depending, depending on traffic. Sometimes we have some grade levels. Well, normally your kindergarten, first and second grade leave earlier. They have 1 hour less, and then the other group would leave after. But it's going to be the exact same hours that you have here. Now, I cannot tell you.
Time of day that's
I
required,
can
for
exactly
360, 390 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, what's
But
required
remember
for
that,
elementary, middle school.
yeah, when I was talking about the middle school, there is 5-minute passing. They have to pass from one class to another. They're not going to stay in one place. And there's also the lunch schedule that.
But I
have
did
to
hear
have.
4 90-minute periods a day.
What?
4 90-minute periods a day in middle school,
It would be, yes, plus
plus lunch, plus passing time, plus
the
homeroom.
homeroom.
Okay. All right.
What do you add in the teacher planning time?
The teachers plan every other day. Every teacher has one planning period.
At the beginning.
Which will be one of their blocks,
One of their blocks. The teacher will
depending on the
have-
master schedule, how it's.
There will be some teachers planning first period, some teachers planning fourth, fifth, whatever it falls on the master schedule.
So then basically what I'm seeing is that every student will have PE in 6, 7, and 8 unless they have a waiver.
As required, yeah, as required. As required.
So for the electives then, your application talks about 2 electives.
There's going to be more.
Basically, each student has 2 electives within their schedule.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
I
yes.
said we're already offering 2
Yeah, okay. So what I heard you say is if they have intensive math, then they're down to one elective, right? So where does the STEM focus come into play as opposed to students who want to focus on art and music? This is all student choice, and are you going to be able to offer all of those areas of focus in your electives?
Okay, for instance, first of all, our science classes are very STEM oriented. We incorporate a lot of the STEM techniques into the science and also into the mathematics. It's a lot.
You too.
In the mathematics, it's very important to have that. So, but in addition to that, most of our schools offer the robotic elective. We also have computer elective, the programming. We do the code day, what do you call it, our code, a lot of stuff throughout the school. So we try to do sometimes, they're incorporating that the English teacher may be reviewing a science project for the accuracy. We try to get the teachers to work together, and it's been successful. We try to get our students very much involved in all the competitions that are countywide or statewide. Again, most of our Pinecrest school came to the Florida competition in robotics, and they are also involved in MESA and all the other high-level competition. They compete in mathematics, and also we got clubs, interest clubs after school. We have like a drama club for the students that cannot take drama because that may be the child with the intensive class, etc. So we try to have after-school activities that relate to their interests. Dance seems to be very popular among our schools. A lot of our girls are in dance, but then in addition to that, we will have a dance competition team. We have cheerleaders. We try to have as many sports as we can at the middle school level.
So in speaking of your after-school clubs, how are those funded, and what is the transportation for students?
Okay. Transportation is the same transportation that the parents will do during the day. We do not offer an activity. We do, some of our schools, we have an activity bus to take our students to competitions or to go to games to another school, etc. Once they are not inter, but intra schools, we always have a bus, and we have a couple of people that are chauffeurs throughout, that are certified by the district that we're in, so they could drive the bus. In many cases, we tell the coaches, you want to be a coach, try to be a chauffeur also. And, kill two birds with one stone. As far as the after school, we do have an after school program that we charge for, like any public school do. It's very inexpensive, but it's the same. We try to charge exactly the same as the public schools, because then the students could stay there till 6 o'clock, and that's basically for the parents who work that need that. So we have before care and after care. Right. That we charge. Tutoring, we do not charge. Now, if the student is in after-school care and paying for being there, but is our idea that they need a specific tutoring math or reading, at that point they will go with the other students that are not in after-school care, and the first hour after school ends, they will be in that tutoring.
Right.
They'll say 2 days a week of tutoring in reading. The child will leave the aftercare.
So are your teachers then paid extra to stay after school?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Oh, absolutely.
And then they do the fundraising for the clubs as well with the students.
We do, yeah. The clubs are paid by stipend. The tutoring is paid in an hourly wage.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to move over to Tammy Castles to ask some questions about services for our ESE students.
Good morning again.
How would an ESE teacher at Pinecrest instruct a student with a disability in the gen ed classroom, and what would that look like?
Hi, how are you?
Hi, good morning.
So depending on the model that we're using, so for example, if we're doing support facilitation where the ESE teacher is pushing in, then the teacher is going to be working with the general ed teacher, and they're going to make sure that they're sharing their lesson plans, and based on those lesson plans, the special ed teacher will be pulling out the IEP and ensuring that all the accommodations that are on the IEP are being implemented, and at the same time that the instruction is being specialized, because it's not just enough about bringing a special ed teacher in, it's about making sure that that instruction is being specialized. So during the, for example, a reading block, once the general ed teacher does the full group, then the special ed teacher might pull her group to the back or to the side, and then that's when they'll specialize the instruction, for example, using the CRIS strategies, using the multisensory, making sure that they're getting to the nitty-gritty of the reading skill that's on the IEP to ensure that that skill is being taught.
Okay, thank you. That was very thorough. So are we going to use support facilitation model versus co-teaching? Is it going to be bell to bell, or has that been decided yet?
It hasn't been decided yet because it basically depends on the number of students that we have with IEPs.
Okay.
What we do is that we do follow the Florida Inclusive Network's model. And so what we do is when we are creating the master schedule, we are for sure looking at our ESE students first that have IEPs, and then we want to make sure that we plug them in first, because what you want to do is that you want to work around the special ed students, because you have you want to make sure that you group them, you want to make sure that you have enough teachers that are certified in order to work with them, and the way to do that is always start with the special ed. I'm very visual.
I agree, they should be scheduled first.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, if a student is not successful in the least restrictive environment, how would the IEP team move forward?
Absolutely. So then that's the beauty behind progress monitoring. So just because the fact that they're in special ed does not mean that they're not being monitored. They're also doing the iReady. So we are having data chats with them. A lot of people think, well, just because they're special ed, we don't have to monitor them anymore. They already have what they have. So one, they will be monitored. Second, if they're not making the progress in regards to their IEP goals, then we will make sure if we have to put them back in tiers, we put them back in tiers. If not, we look at assistive technology. Maybe there's some assistive aids and supplementary aids that need to be looked at. And if that fails, then we need to look at changing the placement, maybe to a resource room or something to that nature.
Okay. You mentioned the tiers. Will you go into a little more detail what the difference would be between a tier 2 and a tier 3?
Absolutely.
Please?
So then when you're looking at a tier 2, you're looking at basically around 2 to 3 times more of intensive instruction, depending on the goal and on the skill that you're working on. It could be mathematics, it could be reading, it could even be behavioral, because we do have students that also go through the tiered process behaviorally. And then based on that, whatever type of skill that we're working on, for example, if it's decoding, we're going to work on the decoding. We're going to be very specific, explicit, systematic instruction with them, so that we can make sure they're making progress, and we're going to monitor. We're going to do that for about 5 to 6 weeks. If after that they're not making any progress, then we're going to go to tier 3, and then we're really going to ramp it up, because right then and there, that's when we really have to, as a team, work, see exactly what is the problem here, where is that I guess, that issue, that problem area, and then target that problem area, and then you're looking at around 4 times of intensive interventions at around 30-minute blocks.
And to guide your instruction, will you be using iReady?
Yes.
For reading?
Yes.
and math?
Absolutely.
Yes.
And math?
Yes, and for math as well. That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Which advanced rigorous academic courses will be available to gifted and/or students requiring an accelerated course of study?
Okay.
Thank you.
We're very big that we're doing pretty good with the gifted students. As far as the middle school, we are using the Springboard material from the College Board, which is a pre-AP, and it has been very successful. As a matter of fact, Pinecrest Middle in the county has been like a model. They bring people from other parts, and we are using that program for all the students, including the ELL in the language art classes. But when you get to the gifted, you have a lot of added things that we have in that class. They're going to be reading more. They're going to be discussing the novels more. It's a lot of, one of the things that is very interesting, because I love to observe classes, is when they do debates. And you see those gifted students, they really shine in many cases with the debates and the preparation and presentations. And they do more. And we have, most of our schools have a very big percentage of gifted endorsed teachers. We kind of try to encourage a lot of teachers to get the gifted endorsement. We offer them in our schools. In the summer, we offer the courses, and we open it to any teacher that is interested, even if they're not teaching the gifted that year. And it has been very successful. They like it, and the parents like it, and I think we do pretty good, because we are pushing the students a lot in middle school. Like I mentioned briefly before, by the 7th grade, some of the students are going to be taking algebra. Many students will be taking the physical science. Most of our schools, over 60% of our students are taking the algebra test. In a minimum of 60-70% take algebra in 8th grade. In some of our schools, we do a double dose, algebra and geometry, for the gifted student. And that has been phenomenal, 100% passing in those cases because I guess they get different skills through algebra and geometry, algebra 1 honor and geometry honor, and they do quite well. So as far as the gifted are concerned, we are pushing them to get high school courses. We offer, for instance, Spanish and French in high school level, starting in 7th grade. The two language. Spanish in most of the school, because depending on what kind of teacher we have or what the demand is, it could be French or Italian, but they are offered at the high school level in the middle school. We even got some of the schools thinking about offering AP Spanish in the 8th grade. So the pushing of the gifted students, it works very well. I think we are graduating in our current high school in Pinecrest. We graduated like 20, no, it was like last year, like 51% of the class had at least 1 year of college when they graduate through dual enrollment and advanced placement. So we are very strong pre-AP curriculum in the middle school in all the subjects.
And just like we differentiate instruction for students that are struggling, we also differentiate instruction for students that are higher achieving. So at the elementary level, even though they might not get pulled out for a certain subject, within that other subjects, we are making sure that when we are doing our groups, that they are grouped accordingly and they are getting challenged when they're meeting with that teacher in that group. And then basically, it's just a lot of intense. When you're thinking of Webb's depth of knowledge, we are going all the way up in the depth of knowledge, which is what mirrors the FSA as well. So we want to make sure that, we're hitting it, but hitting it in a profound, deep way. It's not just this recall, but we're going up to the Webb's depth of knowledge levels.
Some of our elementary schools are using Gradebook and very successfully in the classes.
I just have one last question. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So did I understand correctly that algebra and geometry, a student can be enrolled in algebra and geometry at the same time?
Correct. And pass both in 8th grade.
Okay. 8th grade?
They have a very intense, very deep, advanced math in 7th grade, and this by recommendation, and there are students that get 4 and 5 in the FSA.
So it's
the
based on
parents
data.
get explained. We had a camp in the summer to prepare them, where they come for a week, and they get some challenges in the summer, and it's obviously we don't force anybody to that, but it's the majority of those kids pass. I would say 95, 100% of them passed in the 8th grade, Algebra 1, Geometry, and Biology honors.
Okay.
Yeah, it's safe to say that all students that excel academically within our Pinecrest Academy school will have every opportunity to start earning their high school college credits in middle school, which then in turn, if that's that kind of student, will have the opportunity to start earning college credits once they get to high school.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So to follow up on that, I want to go back to the concept of the student progression plan. Knowing our student progression plan for our courses and our math acceleration, our science acceleration, our advanced ELA acceleration, my understanding is you intend to use our student progression plan.
Absolutely. 100%.
So basically, in a lot of what you just said, that does not align with our student progression plan. So could you explain that?
You are not allowed to teach, to do biology and physical science in the middle school?
We do physical science honors in middle school. We do not do biology.
Okay, so, because I didn't know, I thought that if the students were ready, could we ask permission to do it or no?
And this is what we were trying to clarify with the board members. You made a point of saying that pretty much it's the same plan everywhere, and yes, the state does give us some structures, but every district is different, and that's what we look for, because a lot of times applicants, they just claim they'll do our plans, and what applicants don't realize is you can have your own student progression plan, and that's fine, but we look for that lack of alignment where the applicant says, we'll follow your plan, and it doesn't match with what the school proposed, which is awesome. What you're proposing to do is great, but it does not align with Sarasota's.
Right, but we'll follow Sarasota's
But
pupil
then you can't
progression
follow,
plan.
if you follow Sarasota, then you're not implementing your model.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to get at. You don't have to. So you can't say on the one hand, this is a replication of a model, and you have all these fabulous components and pieces, but then you're going to follow our ELL plan, our reading plan, our student progression plan. Well, then you don't have your model implemented with fidelity anymore.
My understanding is that the reading plan, the comprehensive reading plan, have to be approved by the state.
Correct.
And we had never tried to do our own because, again, like I said before, because the students come, particularly when you open a school, we're going to get a 5th grader coming from your school. We're going to get a 4th grader or a 6th grader. So I think it's to the benefit of the student to continue the plan. Now, obviously, we're not going to have 7 and 8 grades on the first year. So, because we probably only open to 6. We don't ever, in none of our schools, we have opened 7 and 8 on the first year of operation. So, until we know what we have on 6th grade, we don't even know if we're going to have any of the 6th graders that we have ready for the rigor of having algebra in 7 or going into physical science in 7, because obviously they have to take physical science before they take biology. We do it that way. And so I think that depending on who our students are and how well we do, that'd be something that if we're going to be able to implement our model, we will come back to you and say, yeah, we got students.
And this is,
would that be possible?
The disconnect is that we're assuming that you studied the area. We're assuming that you think your school will be a good fit here in Sarasota. We're assuming that you have a very effective model because you do have a lot of A schools, as you've pointed out. So this is why we're a little surprised when you're either saying that you don't know who you're going to have in your schools, or that when you're going to follow our plan when obviously you don't have to. And we don't want folks to follow our plan if they have something that's unique and different.
Well, I think it's not that we're still going to deliver our model, but there are just some minor recommendations that you made now when it comes to the advanced academics piece. So I wouldn't say that we're not going to deliver our Pinecrest model. We will, but there are some minor adjustments, and I would say minor because the only thing that I've heard from our entire committee here is the advanced academics piece, where we can tweak, but that I don't think at all that's going to take away from what Pinecrest is and what Pinecrest represents with the incorporation of the STEM, et cetera, and Project Lead the Way. So I think it's just a main.
We don't want you to change your models. What we're saying is that you just, because it is very common, and we throughout many years of doing this, and that's just frustrating. Don't say you're following our plan because you might have something totally different. Of course, still within the parameters of what's required. We get that, but don't distort your model because you want to fit in with Sarasota's model.
Am I allowed to say that we would never be below your plan, but that we may do some stuff
Touche.
above?
All right.
We never be below. I guarantee you that.
Okay. Right. I have because I'm in charge of target population and student enrollment and student goals. So you notice that we made a comment. We're asking for clarification about the % of students that you serve. And we did focus on the 2 schools that were listed as the school model to be replicated because we were concerned about the very low percentage of students with disabilities as well as ELL. And the neighboring schools, whether it's Ashton and Sarah Middle or even going beyond with that 5-mile radius, it's significantly different. And you did reply that across all of your Pinecrest schools, you have a lot of variation from 2% all the way to 15%. And it goes back to the, you list the 2 MSIDs, but then you go back and forth. Well, it's the network and the model, or it's the 2 MSIDs. So my perspective is that you can't pick and choose depending on the point you're trying to make. So if it was a whole network, then all of the MSIDs should have been listed. If it's only the 2 schools, then we're sticking to the 2 schools that you listed as a replication school.
I thought that we have submitted data for all the schools. That is in the back somehow.
Well, yes, on your applicant work history, you list everybody, but within the body of the application. So that was our concern, was with the %. So we're giving you the opportunity to say, well, how would you serve a significant larger percentage of students? So we get it that you have experience with other schools, but those might not be your A schools, because as we pointed out, some of your Orange County schools, weren't so hot to start off with. That's my technical term for not being an A school.
By the way,
So again, so if it's a network of schools, then we have the right to also include schools that were not high performing. And if it's only those two MSID schools, then we have a right to say it's very, very different from the population that you will be serving.
Yes, and so I have that answer. The plan to address the population of students with disabilities, and is this working? Yes.
Yes.
And this also goes And this also goes with English language learners as well, because a lot of the strategies that you use with special ed students can also be used with English language learners. We provide extensive professional development during the summer with the skills required, so that we can we can teach them how to specialize instruction, make sure that they're doing their accommodations. This is offered by myself through a service through Academica. We provide best practices at each faculty meeting in regards to how to work with students that have disabilities, with students that are English language learners, and it depends, because based on the population that we get, there might be, we might do more of a focus on if we have a higher percentage of students with disabilities, a higher percentage of students that are English language learners. We look at different strategies that can be used within the classroom to incorporate all type of learners, for example, cooperative learning. So we want to make sure that, and that goes very STEM oriented as well, so we want to make sure that we're giving them as many strategies as we can and opportunities for cooperative learning. We access all of the Florida discretionary projects so that we can get free PD, free webinars from them. For example, we use Fiddlers and all of their trainings, and that also helps with working with students that have special needs. The CARD Center, if we have students that have students with autism, we also make sure that we're accessing their services as well. Again, I had mentioned earlier that we create our master schedule based on FIN, so that we're ensuring that all of our special ed students' needs are met. And again, we very much focus on differentiating of instruction, especially at the elementary levels. We want to make sure that our high group, that our teacher is rotating those groups during the math blocks and the reading and the language arts blocks. So we want to make sure that our group that is the most neediest, they're at least being seen 4 or 5 times during the week. Our middle group is seen about 3 times a week, and then our higher achieving group is being seen about 1 or 2 times a week.
In addition, for the numbers that you were mentioning, one of the things that happen is that we do have a very high number of applicants. And because in most of our schools that have elementary, the students all enter at the kindergarten level. Very seldom do we get too many, because we may have 2 or 3 spaces in 3rd grade, 2 or 3 spaces in 4th grade, and siblings get first consideration. So, for instance, Pinecrest North, which is one of the schools that we've been talking about, when we opened, it opened in an all-Catholic school. And when we opened the school, we took a lot of the students, they applied first, they were given first priority because they were closing their school, and a lot of those students apply. We also get, any place that we open, we get a lot of, I don't know if you have them in Sarasota, but in Dade County, there are a lot of private schools, but they're not like your big Catholic school or accredited school, like schools that go to 3rd, 4th grade, started like a pre-K, and those parents tend to apply to the charter schools. So sometimes we accept a student, and then it takes, immediately we have to put them on Tier 1 because we realize that they are not ready. I could also say one of the discussions we have is we're pretty good with the RTI program. And some students are on Tier 1 and Tier 2 and never really get to be, because we start Tier 1 in kindergarten.
That's great.
Particularly in our elementary schools.
We're very prescriptive, and we really diagnose through the tiers process. And also, we do have a great percentage of students on 504s as well. So even though they're not special ed, they are getting accommodations similar to students that are in special ed. So that also, plays some weight into the special students that we see. But I do feel that we can certainly meet the needs of our special ed students.
So just a word of advice: if this does move forward, you did a great job in the demographics with the geographic area and the population. You may want to take a look at the characteristics of schools and the students and the population there. So again, that's what we look for, is a rationale. So, because they are quite different from some of your other models. And yet we assume that good instruction is good instruction, but sometimes there are different pockets of students. And we felt that was also an area that was not fully addressed in the replication section of the application. So it's very interesting to look.
We will.
So let me see, because we're kind of getting close with time. Jamie, would you like to ask a few questions about the ELL section?
Yes. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Is this working?
Yes.
Okay. So I was very happy to read your application, but there were some concerns. I was happy to see that you say, and you state several times, that you are willing to follow the district ELL plan. But then again, the same issue, there are components of your model that do not go along with the district ELL plan. For example, one of the ones that really concerned me was your model with the HLA and the creation of curriculum for those courses. So can you explain to me how that looks? What is actually your HLA? How are students being served? Because if I'm not mistaken, the models that the schools you're replicating are very high ELL. And I don't know if you're familiar, if you looked at the area where you're planning to be at, where, for example, Ashton, it has 20 students, but there are 10 different, or 30 students, 10 different languages spoken there. Palmer Ranch is the same. I mean, there's a very wide variety of languages. Actually, Ashton is 18 languages at the school.
Yeah.
18. So that area is very different to probably where your Spanish or very high Spanish-speaking schools are at. So how does this model going to support
Obviously,
the needs of the students?
Obviously, it has to be based on we're not going to try to teach a student that is a Haitian Creole student in Spanish or a Chinese student, etc. In general, the instruction will be given in English with ESOL strategies. Every one of our teachers have to have the ESOL issues and strategies courses and in most cases, most elementary teachers have to be ESOL certified, because they came out of the colleges with the ESOL certification. So using the whole, English language is going to be the main course. In some cases, in kindergarten, we have some students in some of our areas, like in Little Havana, in Hialeah, etc., that yes, the majority of them speak Spanish, and what we have done in the past is we have a paraprofessional that is bilingual, that in some cases could translate to those group of students. We also have done that with Haitian Creole, if the numbers are appropriate for that. But if it is, like if we have 18 different languages, we obviously are not going to have 18 different curriculums. And as far as the curriculum we use, Wonders, most of the curriculum that we use does have Spanish translation. And the teachers get a lot of techniques that are ELL technique. And like we were saying, we are very strong in that, firm believer. Like many of us are product of an ELL program of one type or another. And if somebody haven't cared, we wouldn't be sitting where we are. So we have a tremendous amount of empathy for all students, but those students are special, particularly if it's only 2 or 3 in a grade level. So trying to give them extra time, and like we always have the regular English, in the middle school we'll have the regular English class plus the developmental that is based on ESOL level as opposed to grade level. And has been very successful with the use of paraprofessional and the pull-out of a group of kids. Like the paraprofessional could be there in let's say a history class, and then after a while move with those kids, and in the vocabulary section sometimes use translation when necessary.
Okay. And now the other question is regarding the Access 2.0 and the WIDA framework. How will that look in your regular basic subject area classes? How will teachers use the Access scores to differentiate instruction? So if you can talk to that.
Yeah, and again, in many cases, when we try, just like we do with the ESC student, let's say we have 5 fourth graders that are ELL, they probably will be put on the same class so we could have a paraprofessional that work with them after the teacher does the main instruction, they put that, they will be working as a group. Sometimes we use some of the students to also work with them. The cooperative learning is very important for the ELL students, so they could start communicating with other kids. The teacher, of course, need to identify in their lesson plans what ESOL strategies they're using and who are their ESOL students. That we're very big on that. Many years ago, we used to when I taught, we highlight. Now it's in an electronic grade book, and it's still a way to communicate that that teacher needs to know who their ELL students are and what techniques they're using for it. And we are very big at checking the administrators, principal and assistant principal. We check and sign lesson plans on a weekly basis. And when we go and do walkthroughs, we know where those ELL students are. And we're going to be looking to make sure that they're receiving the instruction they need to receive.
And certainly it's challenging when you have so many languages that you're dealing with and you're trying to teach them English. So again, it just goes back to those basic teaching strategies. What are those good, sound teaching strategies that we're using to ensure that they're acquiring the language and immersing them, making sure that they are a part of that group, that they're doing the cooperative learning, even going, and we have teachers many times that, because we are exposed to many different languages other than Spanish. That's the beauty behind Google now, that you can go in and you can say, how do I say this? How do I say that? How would I say this? And you start establishing relationships with the students, and they think to themselves, oh my goodness, they know that this is that car, they know this in my language, they know my name in my language. You start establishing that relationship with those students, and you see how they just start opening up. And the beauty with kids is that they're sponges, so they really pick up learning a second language much quicker than an adult would.
Yeah, differentiation is going to be key based on the assessment results and how you differentiate the instruction to bring up those skills in the language that they have to attain.
My last question. Our district EL plan talks about an ESOL liaison, which is the person in charge at the school of the process and procedures, whereas in your application, it talks about several people doing different things that would be under one person who oversees the program at the school. So how would that work?
In the middle and high, we have an ESOL department chair, because sometimes we got several ELL teachers. So that department chair usually doesn't teach all day. They have some free periods in which they either pull out students or look at the paperwork, because ELL requires a lot of paperwork, a lot of committees, a lot of discussion, a lot of communication. So depending on the numbers, we usually have an ELL teacher that doesn't teach all day, that spends some time on this manner. In addition, the assistant principal in most schools is very involved in all the committees, in all the decisions of the ELL group.
Okay. Thank you.
And counselors, by the way. Counselors are very, very important in working with ELL students.
So just in concluding that section, we noticed that the two schools that you listed, MSID, I know it doesn't cover all of the network of schools, 98% and 100% Hispanic, and that was our point. You will not get that in the area that you're looking at.
We know that.
Okay, so.
18 languages.
Okay, you sure you know that? Okay. And also, I was surprised, and maybe I wrote down the wrong numbers because sometimes I do, that even though your schools are 98 and 100% Hispanic, the ELL proportion, percent in one, is only 3.9. So it's like, wow, that's interesting.
Okay, I'm going to go back to, these schools are in the west area of Miami. It's usually not the first stop for immigrants. We have other schools, not Pancrest at this point, but like if we're in Little Havana or in some areas of Hialeah, Northwest, that the percentages is higher. However, one of the things is we have a lot of kindergarten that are qualified as ELL when they come in, because when they ask the 3 questions on the survey, do they speak any, the home language survey, they say yes, 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 and then they start kindergarten receiving ESOL services. By the time, again, we don't accept too many. It's not that we don't want to. We only accept in other grade levels as students available. Like if we're going to have 100 6th graders, or let's say 100 4th graders, or if 2 leave, we're going to accept 2. And usually it may be a sibling or it may be somebody else in the lottery, but we had no control about who those people are. Another thing I'm going to say, and it's kind of, I'm going to say it. People need to know to apply by a deadline. And the people that come from another country, you're still, let's go to Maslow's, we're in full and shelter, we're not too sure that you know that there are schools of choice and that you have to make an application between November and February in order to get into that pool. So in some cases, because we do a lottery, they don't know enough to apply. And I'm going to tell all history. Years ago, in the school that I was the principal, I on purpose was accepting ELL students that really did not apply because I kind of wanted to have more ELL. And they hit my hand because a parent on the waiting list complained that some student that have just come from Nicaragua got accepted into the school and that his kid that was on the waiting list was not. So it's a very difficult thing because we can't go out and say, let's get some ESC or let's get some ESOL because then you're violating the lottery system. So, and I did it because I felt that why didn't I have enough?
I don't know if I want to hear you about violating the lottery process.
Yeah, but it wasn't violating. It was like
put that on the
I had a space. Actually, I had a space for them and not for the other.
Right.
But that's
Like 75 years ago.
Okay, 75.
No, that
Okay.
Let me clarify that.
not involved with
We have these
Pinecrest.
rules in place.
Okay, Judy, we're going to.
Right.
But that's
So again, we were looking for that opportunity in the replication section to address the fact that it will be a little bit different in this area. And we understand you have a standard application, and that's been mentioned a few times. So we also look for some customization for the county in which you're applying. And a lot of times, if you do have a large Hispanic population, you have very low very high SES and low ELL, it's because they're more affluent Hispanics. I'm one of those, and fortunately had parents that were educated and had the means. So, you have to make that clear distinction that it's not just the cultural background; it's also the SES status of the families.
Yeah, we appreciate that feedback. It's really valuable. Thank you.
And most of those schools that we're talking about, they're like about 60, 55, or 60% free and reduced lunch. So the socioeconomic is not that high. You can check it. But the problem is that in Dade County,
I'm a number.
I know her.
in Dade County for Title I now, we're up to the cutoff is like at 75%. So even though we got schools at 60, 65, they're still not receiving Title I.
Yep,
This is a poor county.
Yes. Okay, so moving right along. Let me see. I'm going to give our distinguished community member representative who comes to every single meeting and reads all of the applications, and we are so grateful to you, Rabbi Glickman, for your time. So from your lens.
That's a great introduction. Thank you.
That's because we want you to keep this, stay on the committee for next year, too.
Keep fixing my hair. How can I say no? There's so much great stuff clearly going on at Pinecrest and going on in a lot of the schools that you have, and I'm impressed with so much of what you're doing and accomplishing. My question my concern is how are you invested specifically in Sarasota? How are you specifically concerned about my kids? This was one of the things that came up at the board meeting. Are you willing to make a commitment to put a representative on the board from Sarasota? Is that something that you're willing to say is important to you, that you would prioritize?
We've been talking about it, and it probably would happen after the school opens, and it may be a parent from the school or somebody that is very involved in the school advisory council. And then at that point, when we have opening on the board, we will consider that. But I'm not going to say it's going to be tomorrow.
But that's not a commitment. That's something you're saying if there were an opening, you would consider? Or, okay. So how is that advantageous for me to send my child to a school that is not willing to commit to having a Sarasota representative? How is that advantageous to Pinecrest Academy, Sarasota, not to have a parent?
Well, and I mentioned that last week, I think our schools are an extension of your community. And that's a replication in all the communities that we're in, from South Florida throughout Central Florida. So one of the main priorities for our school is to be vested and connected with the County of Sarasota, to begin building upon those relationships. And like Ms. Marty alluded to, it's very valuable for us to have input from a member, if that so be, whether it be a board member or part of the school advisory council from Sarasota, because you guys are vested here. Now, that's not to say, and it's evident that I'm a principal of the school in Hialeah, and I'm here today. So one thing that you'll see from the Pinecrest network of schools is that we're going to be available. And it's going to be evident. We're available to communicate via phone call or Skype, but we're also available and we'll make adjustments to come in person. To be able to provide, bottom line is to be able to provide the support needed to this county and to the community that we're going to serve.
I understand your question as well. Like, as a parent, and the majority of my career has been in elementary schools, especially as elementary parents, and I'm sure your schools are the same. Parents are really involved in our schools, and I think something that can definitely be said about our schools is that they're very bottom up versus top down, in terms of we want the people involved in the school and involved in the community making a lot of the decisions. Part of that is through some of the things that we mentioned with perhaps down the road having a parent on the board, and also through our school advisory council. But also, I can tell you in all of our schools, we have so many of our parents. I mean, our schools are filled with parents all the time, every day, being involved in spearheading different projects. We want to have an organic lunch program that happened at one of our schools, and so they said, or all of the kids are talking, and we really want to get this after school sport going, or whatever it is. This is how we think we should target this fundraising money. There's so many different decisions that our parents make, and they have to make those decisions because they're the ones whose children are in the school. They're the ones who are involved in the community. They're the ones who know what the community needs and what parents want to see that maybe isn't offered in one of the schools around, whether it's a specific club or a specific initiative or a specific fundraising program that they want to try. So I completely understand your question, and I think we're a lot more open than maybe it sounded like in terms of having a local member on the board.
No, I understand, and I also understand that there is a difference between serving on the PTO and serving on the board, and there is a distinction there in terms of how you're listened to, in terms of who has power, in terms of who is really able to affect change. And just to be more specific, I'm not saying it even necessarily needs to be a parent, but not to have anyone from the Sarasota community, a community leader, anyone to be. It would seem to me that would be something you would be seeking. That would be something that you would want. Just along the lines, are the four gentlemen, are they part of your application, part of Academica, or part of the school?
So this is, what, do you want, go ahead.
I work for Academica. I was here last week, sitting at that.
No, and I'm not trying to be a pain, it just goes along with it, with what you're saying, what I'm concerned with, the disconnect between what you're achieving in other communities and your particular commitment to ours, is that most of them have been on their devices for most of this meeting. And that, to me, is of concern. I think you're doing a lot of great stuff in other communities. I just don't see that there's a commitment to do that great stuff, particularly for our community, that there's an investment particularly in doing that here. And that's just something I would like to see.
I think that just to your point that they're on their devices, I know because I've worked with many of them for years, they're taking notes on what we're talking about and writing things to follow up on and concerns and things like that typically. So I'm guessing that's what they're doing, but I'm going to let Ms. Marty address.
I'm going to also say that you're going to really not know what will work until we really come. I would say that we are interested in all of our schools. We don't want a school in Sarasota that is totally disconnected to Sarasota, and because that would be a failure for us. So another thing that we have done for parents that I don't know if all the schools do here is every time before, the 9 weeks, and every 9 weeks, after we send progress report, we ask our teachers to stay. And we got open the parent could come and talk to any of our teachers.
Yeah, open
We are
parent conference.
open parent-teacher conference from 3 to 6. They don't even have to make an appointment. We make sure that the teachers understand, are compensated, and they stay there, and parents come in. We have parents involved in all of our activities. We have to. We try to hire parents in many cases. Sometimes our receptionist is a parent, because when we come to a community, we're obviously not going to bring people from other places. We're going to bring community people to be very important part of the thing. Our teachers are, I would say, 90% of our teachers are going to be from this area.
Our input for our parent academy workshops is not what I think of. It's not what Judy Marty thinks of. It's not what Shani. It's what the parents' input of Sarasota County. What are the needs? What workshops do we have to extend beyond the school day to teach our parents? Whether it be to fill out a lunch application, how to have access to the parent portal, how to deal with different social issues, social media, cyberbullying.
How to help their kids with reading. We do that a lot.
All that input, it doesn't come from us. That comes from our parents. And unfortunately, the comment that you made, and speaking about the gentleman behind me, I face the same similar situation. We live in a day and age where, the pen and pad are obsolete, and we take notes on our. Well, and I'm not a millennial, but we do take a lot of notes, on our electronic devices. And true testament, and full disclosure, I'm running for Miami Lakes Council, and on my electronic device, I'm supposed to knock on certain doors, and explain to them what my vision, et cetera, is. Full disclosure, I run into a resident, and I am taking notes on what he is telling me. And what that resident goes ahead and tells me is like, it's pretty rude that I'm saying something to you and you're texting somebody. And I know it has nothing to do with this conversation of us presenting to you, but I had to correct them and say, well, sir, I'm actually jotting down your concerns as a resident, so I have it in my notes, because little did he know that there's an app that tells you where you have to visit and where you have to knock. And I didn't want to come off as I was being rude, and I had to show him and say, sir, I'm just jotting down your concerns, because if I have to visit 100 homes, in one afternoon, it's going to be really hard for me to remember what you're expressing to me as a resident if other residents are expressing the other concerns. So I'm like, look, these are my notes on what you're concerned. So, and again, and not a defense to them, but in working with this team for a long time, I can reassure you that what they're doing on their electronic devices is taking comprehensive notes on all the feedback and all the valuable feedback that this entire team has given us.
By the way, one thing about the board, we would have at least once a year the board meeting here. We rotate our board.
Right.
Our board, yeah, but it may be one here, one in Lake County. We do not do all our board meetings in the same place. And every board meeting is open at every school. We prepare a phone and a connection at each school,
right,
so that any parent could talk to the board wherever we are located. We announce the board meetings, we have a special phone, and we invite them to each school. So if there be 15 schools, there are going to be 15 places where a parent could present, and any parent is welcome to be discussing things at the board, and it happens.
And as a charter school, we can't survive without parent and community satisfaction.
We're out of time. Sorry, we had a lot of other good questions, but we have to stop in the interest of time. So any questions for us that we can briefly respond to? We have like 30 seconds.
Anything else that you need, and you want to send us a text or a phone call?
Yes,
and whatever, we're available.
Post-it note, I do that still.
Yeah.
So one quick thing that, when you submitted the additional information that we requested, we had asked for a copy of the minutes when Pinecrest Academy, the board, decided to submit an application to Sarasota County, and I didn't see that in there unless I missed it.
Okay, I'll take
Because I reviewed all of your minutes because I have nothing else to do but go back in time and look at your board minutes.
I will connect with the secretary.
Because our concern is that the board decided to open a school, not academic trying to decide to open a
was the
school.
board.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
I have a special request of the Dreamers Academy. Can we have a tiny 2-minute break so some people can go to the restroom, please? You can go ahead and start sitting up here. Okay. Thank you so much for allowing us a brief bathroom break. We forgot to work it into the schedule. And first things, no, it's Judy's fault. Judy, she's not listening. She's used to ignoring me, yes. On Boss's Day, I get cards that say, "You're not the boss of me," so there you go. So, good morning, guys. So you saw we're at the process, and you're familiar with the process. So again, we do have questions for you in the different areas. And we also have the phone number. We'll be calling Mr. Widener in shortly. Don't know if he's on standby, right? He knows. We'll have to make sure we figure out the Batmobile, Bat phone here. So we received your responses and we started looking at them. But a couple things I want to say before we get into some of the questions, because we saw the frustration at last week's meeting with the board. And some of the, we do pretty much stick to that evaluation tool. And you'll notice sometimes we reverse the words. If we're not really sure, we'll say the applicant does not provide a clear and coherent. It doesn't mean there are not aspects there. We've seen your words, and we saw the frustration that you would repeat the paragraph out of the application. So we saw it there, but what we're saying is that what's there is not clear. So your response is to pretty much take that same paragraph and give it to us again. That's why, the frustration there. Yes, sir.
That we really appreciate the feedback from this document. This is the first time we've gone through this process, and when it comes down to it, there's a lot of things that we assume that there was an understanding of that we put in that didn't clarify on your side. And so just like with any relationship, just a matter of figuring out how to date.
Right. And we want to start off also, you'll notice that our board was very pleased with the concept, and as are we think it's something that Sarasota doesn't have. We think there is a need for it. We're aware of the impact of a program. We know it's research-based and established. No one was ever contesting that. And like you said, we're trying to get at the meat of it. You have to also show that you can implement a model, so it's not enough just to discuss it. As you saw the questions that came from our community member to the prior applicant, we love it that it's a local board. We saw evidence of community support at the workshop. You had a large entourage there, and we really appreciate it. It's not required by law because the Academica folks know that. However, we really think it's a valuable part of Sarasota to have that local school, local representation. We like what they say, they call them mom and pops. So I just wanted to go on record as saying that. And we will give you some examples of where we still feel like you haven't addressed our questions, and that's the whole purpose behind this. So again, just want to make sure that we're upfront with that.
I wanted to also say that, I know many of you personally. My children went through the district, same as many of us here, and I really, truly appreciate all the effort you put in. We just hope that with our answers and with the opportunity to ask us direct questions, you could see that we can implement. And with that, you gave us 5 minutes to just have a statement, and I would like to start with Mr. Kennedy
sorry,
here.
I got into it, forgot the introductions.
No, that's fine.
okay.
Mr. Kennedy.
You never spoke last time.
I know.
That doesn't mean I had
Just
thoughts,
say that
though.
The first person that we were told by your leaders to go talk to was Mr. Kennedy. And when we presented this to him over a year ago, he just opened his eyes and said, I want to be a part of this.
Well, I really didn't need anything else to do at the time, but I'm pretty busy these days. But it was so obvious to me that this concept is beneficial to a certain segment of our minority population, and it is beneficial to our community. And also, I could easily see that this is something very, very good for the district and will help the district maintain its A rating well into the future. So I was excited when I saw the concept and what it could do for the community. And I think this is a capacity meeting to kind of judge whether or not this board is capable of running a charter school. Frankly, I've never seen a better qualified board. If I may, I'd like to run through the members of our board with some of their particular areas. Yes, ma'am?
May I just say good morning to Mr. Widener, who's now on the phone?
Oh, great. Hi, Al.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Go on, I'll just listen in.
Okay. Well, we'll start with Mr. Widener with my introductions, and he was assistant budget chief for the district, there's nobody more qualified than he to monitor our financial situation, and I'd like to thank him for being part of our board. I've worked with him for many years, and I find him to be extremely competent, always accurate, never wrong, although we had some disagreements from time to time over the years when he took money away from me, but nevertheless, he's a super guy, and we're delighted to have him on board. And then we have Dr. Ruby Zigafus, who has 28 years in education, served as a paraprofessional, elementary teacher, reading coach, instructional coach, district curriculum specialist, assistant principal, and now principal at the elementary school level. And ELL herself, she is a daughter of migrant farm workers and always wanted to be a teacher. She's also a professor at USF in the School of Education and has taught many of our Sarasota teachers. Some of her courses were teaching elementary reading, assessment in literacy, elementary writing, early language, and emergent literacy. Ruby has won many awards and was featured in Dan Rather's book, The American Dream. Steve Zikafus over on the end there.
Before you start, I married way up. Just letting you know that right.
So did I. In education for 28 years, currently an assistant principal of a middle school, an educator and business owner. Steve has experience organizing learning within the organization while managing fiscal and human resources. Steve is focused on assessment and meeting benchmarks and goals, as well as professional development. He owns an education consultancy that has provided professional development even in Sarasota for Vicki Marble's Student Leadership Academy in Venice. Together, Steve and his wife have trained over 3,000 students. Teachers, excuse me, thank you. We just talked about Al Widener, and then we have Tom Chaffee here, who I would assume is the chairman of our board. He has 30 years of experience with startup companies, taking 6 of them public. Strong expertise in operations, past school board experience, an accomplished musician, and a strong supporter of the arts integration in educational models. And I think that's very important in our community because art is such a huge part of our community. Then Jerry, next to me, community organizer, education advocate, former teacher, strong background in marketing and public relations, and a pathological improver, and nothing could be truer than that. Then there's me, almost 30 years as a principal. I founded 3 charter schools. All were A's while I was there. I'm also chairman of the board for the Sarasota Academy of the Arts, which is an A school. I was principal of Sarasota High School for a long time, and that was an A school while I was there. So I think we can safely say that this board can do the job for the district, and we can make this school work, and we can make this school something that this district will be extremely proud of. Thank you.
Anything to add to that, Mr. Widener?
Only thing I could add is it almost sounds like I walk on water, which that's not true. But anyway,
I was going to clarify that for them, but I'm glad you brought it up.
Okay, thank you very much. I knew you would. Thank you.
You're welcome.
When I was at Sarasota High, I nicknamed him Scrooge.
Yes.
He still has a plaque, I think.
And Krista is here. You weren't here for the introductions, but it's the usual suspects. And so, the person, your student is here, who's really done, you'd be proud of Krista and the way she's been handling all of this, all these challenging times with the budget. So she's really learned from the best, but I think she has surpassed the master. All right, just telling you.
Well, also,
thank you very much, and I'm very proud of Krista, and I know she's doing an excellent job for the school system.
it's important to notice, too, that Al was a colleague and a member of this Charter Review Committee for 10 years, so he's given us a lot of advice of what you need and how to present this information. Thank you.
Good. Right, so, okay, I'm going to start off. Do you think we need to introduce ourselves?
Yeah, because we have some new
Okay, since, Al, since you're not here physically here, we're going to go ahead and have the committee introduce themselves. So we have some new players. We'll start with Tammy. And let us know if you can hear.
Hi, good morning. I'm Tammy. Now you can. Hi, good morning. I'm Tammy Castles. I'm the Exceptional Student Education Supervisor here in Sarasota. Nice to see you.
Good morning. Suzanne Nyman. I'm one of the district reading specialists.
Good morning. I'm Krista Kurtner, and I'm in the budget department.
Hi, I'm Ellie Ingrick. I'm the special education program specialist for the district.
And I'm Natalie, and
Katrina Ward. Hello.
Al Herrera, Human Resources.
Sue Meckler, Curriculum and Instruction. Hi, Al.
Jamie Rodriguez, he's all the migrant programs.
Rabbi Elaine Glickman, community member, cranky about phones.
Okay. I was like, I'm glad I didn't have my device on.
Sorry about the computer.
No, I think one can tell when you're taking notes versus doing this. Right. It's okay, that's what you're allowed. You're the community member. You can say whatever you'd like to say. So, okay, with that, I'll get us started. So I'm going to talk about the target population and the section on enrollment and recruiting because, they're pretty much intertwined. And I think what we were trying to ask you about is we get the concept of the 70%, 30%, and we know that it might work with the 50-50. What we were trying to pin you down on is the statutory language for limiting enrollment, and your answers would come back as it's going to be a great asset for Sarasota County, we're going to do a great recruiting plan, and it wasn't about that. So yes, we gave you kudos. You have a really sound, comprehensive recruiting plan to reach the families, no doubt about that. So we were just intrigued and wanted to make sure that you were not in violation, like that lady mentioned, of enrollment. So for a typical school, there's an application, parents fill it out, hey, they get in, or there's a lottery process, very simple. When you're trying to, as a state allows, target instruction, like you have a VPA program, you want kids to audition, or you're looking for certain kids because they have certain academics, you can have that. The law is very clear, but you have to spell it out in the application. And it even talks about as specified in the application. So we know that you can't come out and ask on the application form, hey, are you an immigrant and don't speak English? Or hey, so we're going, how are you going to be able to not violate student civil rights, but still capture the population you want to, and maybe end up with that 50-50, 70-70. So that was the nature of our questioning, and we could see maybe you didn't understand it that way because of the responses. So, and I know that you said you're going to be in a population where just because of the draw, you will end up with a large Hispanic population, non-ELL speakers, and Hispanic, so Spanish speakers. So on the one hand, you talk about the model being effective, and we've seen the research with that proportion, but then we're thinking, I know there's no guarantees, so you may end up not having that model. And so, and again, hand in hand with that is how are you limiting enrollment to capture those students? So if you'd like to speak to that, please.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I know that, as you know, I attended all of your meetings, and I wanted to interject. Well, we attended. Representatives of our staff attended all of your meetings. Thank you for the specificity. I realized that was something that needed clarification. You could not understand the way we were approaching this. This model starts in kindergarten. For kindergarten, we are hoping to have six classes, 18 students each. And the ideal ratio is either 50% native Spanish speakers, native English speakers. It could go up to 70% native Spanish speakers. The applications for a lot of these people will be in 2 languages. I mean, that will be one of our first clues, that if somebody answers the application in Spanish or needs one of us to, do it verbally, because as you know, literacy in these communities is an issue sometimes with adults, that'll give us a good indication. The other thing is that I have been communicating for over a year with the SALA, the Student Achievement Through Language Acquisition Department of the DOE, and the 4 people there have been kind of like orienting us. It is possible to do the kindergarten roundups and have a literacy test or some kind of testing all the way up to not before May 1st. So we will have several open houses for those kindergarten parents. And at those open houses, you could do the testing. And that is perfectly legal. I mean, this is a model that requires a certain ratio, and that is one of our biggest priorities, is to attain that ratio. 2,000 schools around the country have done it, and we also will have a legal team supporting us. Believe me, this is a civil rights school. We're not going to violate anybody's civil rights.
It's also important to note, it's important to note that, and I think the crux of your question is, how do you get get to 70/30, if I'm not mistaken? Is that the crux of the question?
That's part of it, because
Right.
that's your model,
Right.
but also it's limitations of what you can and can't ask.
Right.
So we know that once the student's enrolled, yeah, you can
Right.
give them a test and all that, but you can't
Right.
do it in advance.
So yes, you can, and this is how you can. It actually has to do with, you can split, if you to your VPA point, we have a 70% enrollment block and a 30% enrollment block. And so it is, while the school itself, and this is from council, while the school itself, we want it to be 70/30. If there's a lottery, you have a 70%, are you joining the 70% cohort, or are you joining the 30% cohort? So that is a completely legal part. To your point about VPA, you're applying to Booker, but are you applying to VPA?
Right.
So it's the same exact thing. So that 70% cohort, so we know, based on, to Jerry's point, there's two applications at that point, right? Are you applying in Spanish, or are you applying to the 70% cohort, or are you applying to the 30%? And that's completely legal and is the way it's done in other states. So what we're waiting for, what Jerry was, what's we're working on, we want a letter from our attorney, to state that absolutely is legal here, county, state law, because it's federal, it's fine, it's state, it's fine. We just want to make sure there's nothing weird here we got to deal with.
No, and you are right. You can legally wait the applications once you receive them. You cannot ask in advance if a child's an immigrant, if they're
Totally
just
understand
because
that.
someone fills out a Spanish application, you're assuming they're going to be a native Spanish
We
speaker.
don't assume anything.
Yeah, never.
I do
So again, our question is, and see, it's disappointing if you say 200 other schools have done this, so why can't you take what they're doing and explain it to us?
Sure, no, and we're doing that now. So obviously this is our first go around. We didn't pay for these guys. We talked to them how they did
Oh
it.
yeah, it's a professional writing.
They have 6.
Yes.
So
no, Academica runs 160
right, exactly.
schools statewide.
So very different from our approach. And I think, noting that we're going to fish where the fish are, I think that's a big part of what we're talking about here. So when the outreach and the marketing drives who you're talking to. So we're not going to be out marketing on Casey Key. Okay, so we're going to be in the churches. We're going to be in where all those kids are. So the majority of the applications that will be coming in will be due to the marketing, of course. So it's targeted.
So you may have 100% Hispanic, 100% Spanish speakers. You may have no one. That's a possibility.
I don't
we won't
think
have
so.
that because there will be 2 pools,
But that's what I'm saying. You can't determine in advance who the 2 pools are. Once you receive the student, you can say, okay, you can give them a proficiency test. You can find out from their records, whatever, that your home language is Spanish, your home language is French. What we're trying to get is you can't do that through the open enrollment application process. And you're saying you would know that just because you're filling out the Spanish application.
I beg to differ. I've been talking to several departments at the DOE and with council, and it is possible, and it is done in not 200, but 2,000 schools. The ratio will be attained.
I'm not questioning once they're there, you can do a lottery. You can wait it, because that's not clear. The issue that we're grappling with is how you even identify them, even to enroll them.
I can identify a family that is Spanish speaking. I mean, lo puedo hacer en español, en inglés. Si alguien me está hablando bien español.
There'll be personal interaction with each family.
Each family's going to be
This is not your typical school like you enroll.
Based on personal interaction, because you're speaking Spanish to abuelita, you're going to make a note that this kid is going to be Hispanic ELL. So then you put a little check mark when you put the application in for the lottery?
If there's a lottery, and I think that assumes a lottery, right? I mean, I think.
Well, or when you weigh it, if you have to weigh it, whether it's a lottery or just waiting to have.
Are they going to the 70% cohort or the 30% cohort? Yeah. Like which are they going to VPA or regular Booker, right? That's the same concept.
Okay, I'm going to continue. All right, so who wants to go next? You want to move over to Dr. Nyman? We'll go in the same order with the reading plan?
Hi, everybody. I am, as I read the application.
You're not getting it.
Oh, yeah.
See, we're not accustomed to doing this, that's why.
You told me you've done it for 14 years, so.
Yeah, but not the microphone. I've been on the board for 14 years, that's true, okay. As I read the application and gained the understanding through some of my own research for some of the references that you gave, I couldn't wait to see how that TMI was going to be involved in reading. And when I got to the section about reading, I began to think about, all right, well, the curriculum is not yet developed, but I understand the qualities and that Dr. Medina is going to be integral in helping develop that. But I didn't get a real understanding of even where we were headed. I mean, I saw our documents there, things that we use, because you said you're going to use our reading plan, but I didn't see the specificity in that. How is that going to help ELL children become readers?
Okay.
That's what I want to know. And how does it help the other 30% of the children be successful too? So let me get real specific about it. One of the things that I noticed, especially for the below-level readers, was that you are going to implement reading recovery strategies. And reading recovery is a program that we have here in Sarasota County that is very highly monitored, and the teachers go through intensive learning and so on for years, and continue throughout all the time they're reading recovery teachers. So my question to you is, as you think about the teachers who are going to be involved in using reading recovery strategies, what does that mean? To whom will that what grades will that apply? And how does that TMI process fit into all of that? So I'm asking a multi-layer question.
Okay. Let me see if I can address it. First of all, good morning. Thank you, Ms. Naiman. We, in our reading plan, we have a 90-minute reading block that is done in English. Right. Let's just say that's the beginning of the day. It's in one of the handouts, one of the education handouts that you have there.
Yes, I have that.
Mm-hmm. That's done in English. Mm-hmm. The standard, the teaching point, the whole group, the small group, the individual support that's provided, the word work even after that, is reflected in the second block with the standard and also the anchor charts and what have you there. For example, so if we have a Spanish speaker in the English reading block, they'll get it a mirrored lesson with, for example, let's say the Wonder Spanish version of it in the second reading block. Now, the student that is English will get the 90-minute reading block because we want to make sure the FSA student, we are aligned with the outcome assessment. We'll go ahead and have it in English, but the second block for that student, to add value to them and make sure that we're moving towards biliteracy, will be in Spanish. So they're getting the same standard, the same anchor, and what have you. Now, when we talk about the student, so to your first question, how does it benefit the ELL student? How does it benefit the non-ELL student or the data speaker? It sort of gets confusing in there. Mm-hmm. That's one piece of it. Now, as far as reading recovery with fluency in phonics and that basic work there, when we see a student that is lagging based on the iReady data, based on the needs and the tracking that we're doing, during the IE time, which is the intensive and enrichment time, there's a 30-minute block there. That's when the reading recovery teacher that's been professionally developed and been aligned. And that's just one of the resources, but given we use that resource, which we will in some capacity, they'll be going in and working with that cluster of students, most likely tier 3 students that are two years behind or more in reading, for that block of time over time to see if we can't close that gap before they get into the intermediate grades.
So reading recovery is a first grade program.
Yes, ma'am.
And so where will you get that reading recovery teacher? How will they be trained, or where will they be monitored as time goes on, because that's important?
Yes, ma'am.
And then what about the other grades that are not first grade? How will their below level readers be addressed?
Okay. One of the things in the application or the response that we got, it said that all teachers will be bilingual. That's not necessarily true. We're looking at half of the teachers. Let's look at the kindergarten cohort for a second. Half of the teachers within a paired team of an English-speaking teacher and a Spanish-speaking teacher, they'll have one cluster that they share students within, or they work together in tandem with, depending on the block. Mm-hmm. So therefore, when it comes down to trying to hire aggressively, somebody that has the background, ESC certification, gifted certification, which is all very difficult. I hire all the time. It's very challenging to find the right person or a person sometimes. And so therefore, that's going to require us within our own professional development, not just within this first school, but with the schools that will follow once we show success here, to make sure that our PD is aligned to reading, specifically with ELL, the reading recovery. How do we progress the ELL students at the same time considering them? So when it comes to your question, how we get them trained, how will we monitor them, the principal, the on-site principal, along with the potentially reading specialist at the site, will be responsible for not only intervening and doing interventions with the students at that grade level and the other grade levels, but also making sure that they're monitoring them, and the principal's responsibility will be to monitor the person monitoring. To your second question, could you ask that again?
So what about the other grade levels? What are those strategies and the reading recovery strategies that you actually mentioned? What will that be? What will those be for grades outside of grade 1?
At this point in time, let me just speak in general regarding the 1 through 5, or the 2 through 5, those kids that might be 1 or 2 years behind. The intervention programs that are during the IE time would be the supplemental or the comprehensive, if a person's 2 years or more, would be some things we pull from Wonder, something we pull from Fountain Spinell. We're also trying to do some alignment with the Teachers College work for Columbia, because they do have a strong ELL push and some conversations. But as far as in 1 through 5, until we get, and my wife can speak better to this than I can, given her reading background, until we get to the principal hired, that decision right there will be left in the principal's hand to see what they're strongly supportive of. Thank you.
Good morning. So I'd like to follow up on Suzanne's questions and get a little bit more clarification. Again, we are excited about a concept of two-way immersion. I think it's just that, as I've said repeatedly, and I know, Jerry, you've heard me, we are basing our analysis on the data that was presented to us in this application. For me, there was just a very basic understanding here, and the clarity that was needed was not presented. So literacy is where my heart is.
Yes, ma'am.
So I am very concerned about the instruction of these students, both our English speaking and our Spanish speaking, and as Jamie will address, other speakers of other languages. When I think about this two-way immersion program, again, when I think about reading recovery, the application seemed to mention that reading recovery may be in Spanish and or English. Are we targeting in reading recovery at grade 1 Spanish speakers who are learning to read or English speakers who are learning to read? And what does that look like for each of those students?
I would prioritize, we've had discussions regarding prioritizing English or students that are behind in English. As far as the student, whether they're Spanish speakers or non-Spanish speakers, if their reading is behind at that point in time, they don't have the phonics base, the phonemic awareness base. They're not getting their letter sounds. They're not doing their progressing, their foundations. Then whoever that child is, and there's going to be a differentiation. So therefore, which comes down to PD. How are we going to supply these two things? And that's something we're going to have to grapple with as we move forward. Is that if a student that is a Spanish speaker is not progressing in English academically, it would definitely be using the English reading recovery approach. If that would take priority over any other thing, because the outcome assessment is 3rd grade, make sure the students do not get retained, 4th grade and 5th grade. So whereas in the application, it might have a reference that they're both available to us, we don't know the children that we have coming into us. We might have a student that that requires us to think outside the box and provide some interventions in their home language first and then push forward.
So again, I'm an English speaker.
Yes.
I'm a kindergartner.
Okay.
What I've heard you say is 90 minutes, I'm going to get instruction in literacy in English. The second 90-minute block, I'm an English speaker.
It's like a 60-minute block, ma'am. It's a 60.
I had 2 90s written down on my notes here.
Okay.
Okay, the 60-minute,
Yes.
the second one
Yes, ma'am.
will be delivered basically repeating the same content, but now it will be delivered in Spanish.
Kindergartner, correct?
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm an English-speaking kindergarten student who is struggling to read in English. How does it benefit me to spend an additional 60 minutes in reading, getting my lesson in Spanish rather than English?
First of all, it doesn't. Second of all, when we get to the second block, when we get to the intervention and enrichment block, we have to differentiate a little. For example, if we have a proficient reader in kindergarten that goes through, or proficient kindergartner that is solid in their first 90-minute reading block, then Spanish seems to augment their experience so they can be successful. If we have a student, a English speaker in the first block that has significant delays, or we know that they're significantly behind even in their ability and literacy at that level, then we are going to have to differentiate not only their intervention and enrichment time, which is another 30-minute block, and also that second one. Our hope here is that, and our goal here is that that both blocks, whether they're English and or Spanish, is going to promote the child's literacy throughout. But if we have a student that is not getting it, is not progressing, is developmentally delayed, has those things that have yet to be identified, then we're going to have to go ahead and differentiate to meet that child's need, and that's what's going to be in the plans and discussions regarding that child at that grade level.
So what does biliteracy look like for that English-speaking student?
The biliteracy is a 5th grade outcome.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 5th grade outcome. So let's say we remedy the child's literacy issues, hopefully, within that first few years, then that biliteracy is going to be maybe not as fluid as somebody that's came in knowing letter sounds and they watched Dora the Explorer and just had all this other academic background. I mean, that's simplified, but than others. So biliteracy and bilingualism will look different because that is a significant outcome, but one of the primary outcomes is that they're literate in English, and we are augmenting their experience to be successful with the Spanish.
Okay. So let me give you another scenario. We move beyond kindergarten.
Yes, ma'am.
Those students who start with you in kindergarten, I understand the progression K through 5.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm thinking about those students coming in those first years that don't have that kindergarten foundation.
Pairs of classes all the way up to 5th grade.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
Where I have a clear understanding now of what kindergarten looks like.
Okay.
But I'm now a 1st grader or a 4th grader coming in to your school. What does my instructional day look like? Where does literacy, I'm focused on literacy at the moment. Okay.
Okay, so let's look at that. Let's look at a 4th grade student.
Yes.
Okay. Well, they're going to have specifically literacy. They're going to have a reading block that's in English. They're going to have, let's assume this is a proficient student, a student that is reasonably at grade level. They're going to have a reading block that's in English. They're going to have a secondary reading block that supports Spanish. That's going to be a Spanish, which reflects the same anchor charts, same teaching point that's reflected in both. So if, for example, we did this whole meeting in Spanish on this side, and you were taking notes and trying to construct what that means and struggling with that information, then if we repeated this meeting in English, you'd go, oh, that's what they were, and aligning vocabulary and what have you. Between the 2 blocks, we also have a 45-minute writing block that will be done predominantly in English. When we have students that are proficient, then we can blend that depending on, it might be at the beginning time of the year, we're going to add we'll do a blended approach of how to move reading and writing in Spanish, or writing in Spanish and English throughout the year. We've discussed, and we've got a year of development here of even partially, or which part of the year is going to be in the writing block that's going to be focused on Spanish, and which part of the writing block will be focused on English, or how to blend those as we move them forward. Then, as far as literacy is concerned, the IE time, the enrichment and intervention time, that's also a component of ensuring that the students become literate and get augmented with Spanish at that time too, if they seem to be proficient or above grade level in
And then my math, science, social studies experience.
You asked about literacy.
Well,
I'm sorry.
literacy is across
Yes,
content areas.
My apologies. And we do have two math blocks, a 60-minute math block and a math club block as well, which the math block, the original math block of 60 minutes will be in English. The math club block will be differentiated between Spanish and English depending on the need of the student. As far as science is concerned, in 4th and 5th grade, that's when we start hitting science. And we are replacing the we have an additional half an hour for science during the 4th and 5th grade.
Did I hear you say science and social studies begins in 4th and 5th grade?
No, ma'am. The specific block dedicated to that only is 4th, 5th, so it's very direct, explicit instruction. Throughout the entire process, we're embedding science and social studies within not only the reading block, but also the second reading block and within our writing. So we're using science-based text, we're using social studies-based text to progress the student through our system to make sure that for example, during our remediation time, we will take grade level text that is, let's say the small group that we have in front of us is a year behind, let's say a D and a level D on Fountain Spinel, and they're second grade, supposed to be in second grade, then that cluster of students that are at that level will have a small group, and the text level that they have within the science concept that match up to the grade level science expectations will go ahead and be used to read, and so they're using literacy at the same time as they're learning the concepts of science.
Natalie, I don't want to keep dominating with time. I just have so many questions, so just stop me whenever.
Well, let's go around, and if we have time, we'll come
Thank
back.
you.
Because that is
I just wanted to clarify one thing. The kindergartners will have 90% Spanish instruction and intense English instruction, whether they're native English speakers or not. But by 5th grade, that model flips. So you will have all of these kids 90 minutes of English class and 10%, 90 minutes, 90% of English and 10% or so of something in Spanish. The first subjects that start crossing over are PE, the specials, 2nd, 3rd grade, as that 90% of Spanish gets reduced to 80%, 70%. By 3rd grade, they're doing math and English. That's one of the first ones we cross over. And then it flips. So somebody from the outside, remember this is a choice school, a parent of a native English-speaking kid that wants to be in this class and in this school in 4th grade, they understand that they want that kid exposed to Spanish, but in 4th grade, it'll only be about 20% of the day that it'll be in Spanish. So I don't know if that provides a little bit of clarification, but.
Right. We'll move on to Tammy. Do you have a question, I think, about ESC services?
When asked to describe, when asked to describe the methods that you would be using to identify students with disabilities, it stated in your clarifying answer that you would be testing a student. Could you explain in more detail what that looks like? And could you also explain the MTSS process, which is a multi-tiered system of supports, please?
Okay, so let's say, for example, a first grader has all the core curriculum, has the second block of reading that's supporting, and also has the IE time. That child is behind. Let's just go with Tier 1 instruction, has all the Tier 1 instruction information, has the 90-minute reading block with even the guided instruction, the guided reading in the middle. That child shows that based on our data stream that we've got from iReady and also the other formative assessments in the classroom is behind, shows it's consistently behind. All of a sudden, that diagnostic that's happened in September, the child pops up as needing extra time, so therefore within the 90-minute reading block, we have the guided reading that occurs that's giving them extra targeted approach toward what they're missing. Let's say the diagnostic says that they don't have phonemic awareness, so therefore during the guided reading time they're doing that. Let's say after a 6-week period that child is still not progressing based on the next month's assessment, then we've got to the teacher and the support people that come in will have some discussions about what's not happening here. And so now we're going to be track closer to the data, and let's say that child now that child's IE time, enrichment and intervention time, now pops up to a Tier 3 level. And now we're using more of a comprehensive materials, hitting hitting the need of phonemic awareness, let's just say. And so therefore now at tier 3, they're getting high, and let's say the child still doesn't progress. Then we have to take that information along with all the other information that the child attendance and background and what have you to bring to our MTSS team to have further discussions. And we'll track and say we need to go ahead and get some more data based on this and move that child forward. I'm not sure if I answered your first question, though.
Well, when you move from tier 2 to tier 3, what I hear you saying is that you will provide more instruction and there will be it will be more intense. I
Even
understand
a higher
that.
qualified person to do that.
Right.
Yes,
so what would be the comprehensive material that you're using?
Well, I do know that, for example, while we're still identifying curriculum, the Wonders has not only the core, but also has a comprehensive and supplemental materials. Given we still are making sure we match up our materials with the needs of our kids. At this point in time, we're looking at Wonders as far as the intervention for that tier 3 piece. We also, this is when we could use resources from Reading Recovery, given we have the staff and the support for that. And also within Fountas and Pinnell's work too, they cite strategy work. And so if we have a knowledgeable professional there, we can not only use from the resources that we've got, but we also use from the strategies and the work that they've got. It's not necessarily about the programs. It's about the people that we're going to bring in, the development of the people that we've got. As long as we understand the process to make sure that we're helping that child, make sure we understand the process to make sure that we don't leave anybody in the loop as far as our ELL students that might be typically in a we want to make sure we profile the process, people over programs.
Right, and there will have to be some understanding of how you're looking at whether it's a language issue or
yes, ma'am. Especially right now, first or second grade. Okay, is this still a language, or are we looking with somebody that has a learning disability or some speech issue that's popping up that we weren't aware of at first?
Right. That is something that, just to your point, that is something that I have noticed when I have volunteered working with the same students for a long time. If you're a bilingual instructor with knowledge of language development in English and in Spanish, you could definitely recommend that, there's something more here. It's not, I worked with a second grade girl that read beautifully. She was being exited from the ESOL program because right now with the lower cut scores, people are deemed English proficient a lot, sooner. And this girl's probably going to be retained in second grade, and I am going to recommend her for ESC because it hasn't been done. And, so those are the things that we really want to make sure we're on top of, and I think we will be able to do that.
You also mentioned about testing. We're testing eyes, we're testing hearing, we're testing the physical testing as well. We're seeing what the MTSS team will recommend, that maybe there's some sort of issue that's popped up depending on the child, but the data will be, the MTSS process is data-based, it's instructional-based, changing the intervention, moving forward, and if still no progression's made at adequate progress to close that gap, then we're going to go ahead and have to see about identification, and then use the professionals around the table to go ahead and determine that.
Okay. At what point do you feel that you could determine a student is in need of specially designed instruction?
Boy, that is different for every child.
It is.
It is different for every child.
It is, but you were talking about moving from tier 2 to tier 3, and then at what point
Let's look at this for a second. Let's say it's a first grade student. First grade is where magic happens. You go from tribal to civilized, hopefully, within that time frame.
Not my kids.
Not your kids. And so let's say at the beginning, as we discussed, the issues pop up, and now it's November, and the child's still not progressing. And then like with specifically first grade, it's amazing right around January or February, all of a sudden the kid accelerates, and those reading levels start to pop up and get to our March, April, where they're doing extremely well. Well, in that kind of setting, knowing that the child's had, let's say, 2 years of instruction, it might hold it at bay to see how this kid does as developmentally the second end of the year starts to work. But if we're talking about a third grade kid that has had